I love carving stamps out of erasers, just ordinary standard erasers. It's cheap, it's fun, it's quick. But the comment I hear most when I say what fun it is it's not as easy as it looks. Well, yeah, everything's not that easy until you know how. So in this video, I've come up with 15 tips that I think will have you carving stamps like a pro. The first is not all erasers are created equally. The ones that I like are just these sort of vinyl or plastic erasers. The ones designed for rubbing out ink are just too gritty, they're too hard. When you carve them, they just crumble. These are really soft and they carve really nicely. Now, because they're soft, you're never going to get really, really fine detail. The next tip is to think about your design. Ignore that, I was just playing. Erasers, are often in this shape. So when you're doing your design, just draw around the eraser and then you can do your design within that. You might say, oh, I want a leaf. There you go, and that's fine. But of course you could cut that into, say, thirds and have little square ones. You could cut it in half. If you need inspiration for designs, try Googling vectors or clip art of whatever you want. Say it was, I don't know, a cat, there you go, cat clip art or cat vector, and that'll come up with lots of ideas. So to get you going, because this is such fun, I've put together a few sheets of different designs and I put those in the sort of discussion bit on this YouTube channel. Tip number 3 is, of course, if you are writing something, say you want to write, I don't know, hello, how exciting. You have to reverse it when you carve it because you print it and everything comes out the other way. So that is the reverse of my name in Japanese. When it's printed, it comes out like that. If you're doing a leaf or a hare or a dog, of course, doesn't matter which way round it is, but writing and numbers, reverse them. And you might think, oh, that's a bit tricky. So tip number 4, are we on 3 or 4? 4. Tip number 4 is about transferring your design to the eraser. So of course you can just draw on it with a soft pencil if you're confident to do that. So say we wanted to transfer this little dog's head design, making sure there's lots of pencil on here. Say with a nice soft pencil, something like that. We can then place it face downwards, make sure it's in place, and we can scribble over the back very, very, very firmly, or indeed maybe use something like the end of a pair of scissors just to make sure we've got really good contact. And there you go, it's transferred to the eraser. And it is reversed because look, there's the black ear and that's over here. We printed out something more complicated. What we can do, if it's been printed on a laser printer, put it in position where you want it to be, and then using some acetone, so nail varnish remover, we can put some on the back of the paper. You can see, look, it goes transparent, and it sort of slightly melts the ink. There's obviously some sort of chemical reaction. It's a solvent. We can again use the end of our scissors and really rub over. I've just covered it so that I don't move or scuff that paper up too much, and hopefully there we go, and we have a transfer of our image. If it's not perfect, of course we can always just sort of go back in and touch it up if we need to. So I've just drawn these two designs out on these erasers. So let's start with the next tip. If you've got a really sharp knife, and what you can do to start with is actually trace, or not trace, but cut round very carefully your design. And by doing that, it sort of acts as a stop. So when you're carving, if you slip or cut too close to the lines, it should stop at this line. It's particularly useful on straight edges, a lot harder, to be honest, on curves. My next tip is that if you've got any little details inside, start with those. The temptation is to cut away the outside because that's quite easy and satisfying. But if you cut the details first, you've got the support of the material around it, which makes it far easier to carve. If I'd already carved away round this cat's head, you've only got a few millimetres of material left to support as I try and carve away the eyes. But if I'd carved them first, look, I've got a whole centimetre of material to support. My next tip is always to turn the eraser rather than the tool. You will get a far better cut. But my next tip is to cut off too little rather than too much. We will go back in and refine the lines. So having cut those inside details, I'm now outlining in this case, and then I will carve off the middle bits. So that's my process: inside details, outline, and then carve off the rest. When you're carving lino, I would always say keep your fingers behind the blade. Lino's quite slippy and you're quite likely to skid across the lino surface and end up gouging your fingers because this is so soft. I've not had that happen ever, whereas I've cut my fingers all the time when I'm doing lino. So next tip is to cut away from your subject matter. The danger, say I started here and cut towards the cat, again if I slipped I'd cut its paw off, which we don't want. So, but if we start at the subject and go away, if I slip, doesn't matter at all. So when you think you're about carved and you're not sure, best way, next thing, is just ink it up and you can immediately see more that you have to carve off or lines that you've got to refine because it's picking up the ink. Print it and that will get rid of the ink and you'll have a record. You'll be able to see again which bits that you've got to get rid of. So my next tip is if you've got a piece like this where there's quite a big area in a corner that is cut away, it's almost inevitable that that will print because you press it down and because of the flexibility it's going to touch the paper. So if you've got an area like that, you can actually cut the whole thing off and you can carry on and refine it as much as you want. My final couple of tips are actually about the paper that you stamp on. If it's got any sort of texture, that is going to interfere with your stamp. So a watercolour paper has, say, if it's cold pressed or a knot paper, it has a little bit of sort of peaks and troughs and you're not going to get a clear stamp. A smooth piece of paper like this, which is just photocopier paper, will. This is indelible ink, but not all inks are. So some inks are water soluble and that's fine. But if you did a stamp and then put water over the top, it's going to run. So inks are either pigment ink or dye-based ink when you get them in a stamp pad like this. Dye-based inks on the whole won't be waterproof and they will fade in light. Now that might not matter to you, but it might. So the paper you use is important, but actually so's the surface that you stamp on. I think that you get a better stamp if you're on a slightly forgiving surface. So this under here is actually a silicone matte and it's just got a little bit of softness to it. So which is your favourite and what are you going to carve today? Oh, just before we finish, bonus ink tip. If your pad is getting rather dried up, did you know you can actually get spare ink? So you don't need to buy a whole new pad. Just Google re-inker and you should be able to find it. It's best if you stick with the brand that you've got. So here, VersaFine, I would look for VersaFine re-inker. But if I couldn't get that because I've just got a generic brand, I would get any black pigment re-inker and I'd be able to top that up.